Hey everyone, I am MSK, aka Master Swag King, coming at you guys today with another video. And in today's video, we are going to be talking about the past weekend at the box office. So we had a brand new Dracula movie come out that didn't do so well. Barbie and Oppenheimer continue their dominance at the worldwide box office. And we are also going to be going over why Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny and Mission Impossible Dead Reckoning Part 1 struggled at the box office. And lastly, we will be covering, did Fast X actually turn a profit at the worldwide box office? So let's start off by talking about the last voyage of the Demeter, which is another Dracula live action take on the character. And I don't think I've mentioned this in a lot of videos actually pertaining to these ones, or maybe I probably mentioned this passingly on one of my Iron Man podcast episodes. I don't really care for Dracula like that all too much. I like vampires and werewolves and zombies and stuff like that, but I've just never been the hugest fan of the character of Dracula. I know they've tried to build like a cinematic, universe around this character a few times. I mean, the last Dracula movie that I remember coming out was like Dracula Untold. That came out back in like 2011, 2012, 2013, 2010, that kind of period were right there. That didn't do so well at the box office. And then I remember Universal Studios trying to, do a universe of like the MCU, which was called the Dark Universe with Tom Cruise's The Mummy. I remember even in the opening credits of that movie, they're like, welcome to the Dark Universe. And it's like, do I even know if I want to have a cinematic universe yet with the first movie? It's like, let's kind of set up the first movie first before we start talking about more characters entering a potentially, big universe. But as you guys know, all those plans for the Dark Universe ended up getting scrapped with the performance of The Mummy at the box office back in 2016, 2017-ish period. So also with Dracula, there have been numerous movies and TV series. I think the TV series, it came out back on NBC. I tried to watch a few episodes of that. That was just really, really boring. I don't know. I'm just not the hugest fan of this character for some reason. The character, to me, is just kind of boring. There's probably some great books out there for the character. There might be some other, older movies on this character. But I saw the trailers for this movie, and the trailers didn't look bad for the most part. You have people on a boat. They can't really go anywhere. It's not a big open area. It's all confined into this one area. So you're thinking to yourself, that's a nice potential, place for a horror movie, actually. This nice confined space where people can't escape from. And then you also have this element of, it's even more tense and it's more attention growing as the film goes on. And if you have this big monster there, how are you going to end up killing this guy, right? So another thing that people need to understand is if you're trying to release these kind of movies, these movies should be released toward the beginning of the Halloween season, as well as, toward, I think, a few weeks before that. Now, a lot of people are going to be probably pointing to the new A24 film, Talk to Me, where that has been doing very well. But A24 releases psychological thrillers and horror movies pretty much throughout the year, and they do well, considering, the budget surrounding their movies. But if we're talking movies like this, when it pertains to Dracula, and I know they didn't actually call it Dracula, blah, 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 but this, I think, should have been pushed back to around the middle of September, closer to the beginning of October, because Disney released Haunted Mansion, and that didn't do well either, honestly, So let's look at the last voyage of the Demeter first, and then we're going to be going over the more global scale for, Barbie and Oppenheimer, right? Also, before I continue, this might be a bit of a longer, past week at the box office recap video, because we have to cover Indiana Jones 5 and Mission Impossible 7, as well as, Fast X, actually. But I think the biggest here to take away when it comes to a lot of these movies is if there's no interest really here, then yeah, it's going to have an impact on the box office as well. Then you got to kind of factor in with all of these big blockbuster tentpoles coming out, people need to keep in mind that these movies are competing with each other. So if the interest might be there, but if all these movies are competing with each other, one is coming out in 1 week, and then, if you don't get a chance to see that movie, then another one comes out, you're like, okay, I'll go watch the other one later. It's a big battle at these kind of things, So when movies like this one come out that are kind of like random movies coming out, dropping when these other bigger titles are coming out, that also makes it hard for these type of films to perform as well, And given with these kind of horror movies, if the horror movies themselves are more on a bigger budget, because typically horror movies and slasher films are on a lower budget scale, so they can get their profit margins higher and easier, it's hard for these movies to even perform very well at all. And if another Dracula movie like this one doesn't do well at the box office, then you could probably look at it and go, probably not going to be getting more Dracula anytime soon. Like, maybe it's at the point where vampire movies, are just not going to be that kind of thing anymore, like they used to be with like the Twilight films, Box office. The Last Voyage of the Demeter flops with 6.5 million. Barbie keeps her crown for the 4th weekend with $33.7 million. The Last Voyage of the Demeter sank without a trace over its opening weekend, going to a watery grave with just 6.5 million. The period horror film, which centers on one of Bram Stoker's Dracula, namely the bit where his coffin gets transported from Transylvania to England, was distributed by Universal. So currently right now, Universal has The Last Voyage of the Demeter out and Oppenheimer, and this Dracula take is not doing well. It's the studio's second stab at reviving the world's most famous vampire with last spring's Renfield. Oh, yeah, I remember that. Yeah, I remember trailers for that, but I just forgot that even existed. A campy take on the blockbuster also collapsing at the box office. With audiences steering clear of The Last Voyage of the Demeter, relegating it to a 5th place finish, Barbie continued to rule the world. The Warner Brothers release earned $33.7 million to capture first place for the 4th week in a row. That brings its total to a glittering $526.3 million. In second place, Universal's Oppenheimer earned $18.8 million for the weekend, bringing domestic ticket sales for Christopher Nolan's look at the life of atomic bomb creator J. Robert Oppenheimer to $246.3 million. Domestically, an impressive figure for an R-rated drama. It now ranks as Nolan's 4th highest grossing stateside release, behind Inception, The Dark Knight, The Dark Knight Rises, all of which dealt with less weighty subjects. So yes, this also, like I mentioned before in the other previous videos like this, Christopher Nolan, it's a household name. Movie is selling and doing very well at the box office. So yeah, Universal might want to try and have this guy stay on their side now, given his success with this film as well. And it's also weird how Warner Brothers has not announced anything regarding Barbie's future, given the fact that it's their fastest grossing movie ever, one of their highest grossing films ever, for being honest here. So also right now you have the writer's strike going on too, so that might be a reason why. Paramount Pictures' Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Mutant Mayhem took 3rd place, earning $15.7 million. The animated feature, which was produced by Nickelodeon Movies and Point Grey Productions, has a domestic total of $72.8 million after 2 weeks of release. Meg 2: The Trench dropped 60% from its $30 million opening weekend to earn $12.7 million for a 4th place finish. That brings the Warner Bros. Adventures stateside haul to $54.5 million. So yeah, this usually happens with front-loaded new blockbusters, is that they just drop in the 60s like that. But given a movie like that, like I mentioned before, it's kind of like those movies, kind of like Cocaine Bear, and these kind of films, after the initial opening weekend, they do kind of tend to, not like flatline, but that kind of like, oh my god, this crazy thing is happening. They kind of, go down after that. Sometimes they do well up to the point where the interest is still there, but it's like that initial big interest of like how big the shark is and all that stuff just kind of, winds down later on. The Last Voyage of the Demeter cost $45 million to produce and ranks as another box office whiff for Amblin, Steven Spielberg's production company, which has released recent commercial disappointments like Easter Sunday and The Fabelmans. The latter at least earned a buttload of Oscar nominations and positive reviews. Well, I'm pretty sure Steven Spielberg's production company also produced the West Side Story remake he did, which also didn't do very well either. The fate of The Fabelmans won't be repeated by The Last Voyage of the Demeter, which suffered a paltry 27% approval rating from top critics on Rotten Tomatoes. Audiences seem to agree with a CinemaScore survey of ticket buyers, giving it a lackluster B- rating. Oh god, $45 million to produce. We're talking like the marketing campaign has to be in like the 30 to 40 millions there, at least on average, right? So this movie needs to be taken in about $200 million to justify its price tag. Ah, man, that might be hard to get for this movie. It might be one of those movies like The Flash where it just completely becomes one of the biggest box office bombs of the year. Potentially. Because remember, The Flash bombed out so hard that major trades just stopped talking about it. It was that bad for that movie. All of this may add up to a stake through the heart of Dracula movies and reboots for the foreseeable future. The problem with movies about the undead, however, it is that it's awfully hard to kill them off. Yeah. Ugh. Goodness gracious. But given how this movie has performed right now, ooh, that is definitely not good. Give me one sec. The Last Voyage of Demeter. Let's see. I wonder, was this supposed to be like a reboot of the entire thing for Dracula? Or was this supposed to start like a new trilogy? You know? So I'm kind of wondering, what was it supposed to lead to? And I'm not talking like, what was it supposed to lead to in terms of like a big franchise? I'm talking like, what were they initially trying to utilize this specific Dracula movie for, you know? Alright, let's see. So let's see. The box office. Oh, that's bad. Oh, that's really bad. 45 million and it opened to 7.6. That's freaking terrible. Yeah, that might end up being one of the biggest box office flops of the year. Oh, God. That is... crap. That is bad. Universal lost out pretty hard with that. It seems like, as you can tell with these numbers right there, people are not interested in Dracula movie anything anymore, you know? Which is sad. Yeah, it's come to that, but, you know, it's what happens when certain, like, genres and certain types of movies just get ran down your throat for all these many years. It's like, people are like, yeah, I'll just check it out later. It'll probably do very well on streaming, potentially, but obviously that's not going to net Universal any money for that, inherently. Alright, so let's go to Barbie and Oppenheimer. Barbie hits $1.180 billion at the global box office. Oppenheimer nears $650 million mark. Barbie continues to shatter records nearly a month after the Malibu icon first graced the big screen. The Greta Gerwig comedy has earned $1.180 billion at the worldwide box office and now ranks as the second highest grossing release in the history of Warner Brothers. Internationally, the film earned $45.1 million from 75 markets to bring its foreign gross to a sizzling $657.6 million. Who factor in the money that this movie took in internationally this week? That is what the Last Voyage of the Demeter box office actually would have wanted, you know? Like, that's crazy. Like, Barbie is doing so well. Like, literally, this number right here is what Universal wanted, because not only is this the Last Voyage of Demeter's film budget, that would have covered the entire thing, even if it, you know, flopped as the weeks had went on. That's crazy. Margot Robbie and Ryan Gosling star in the film, which has become the top-earning movie for a female filmmaker, passing Frozen 2, which was co-directed by Jennifer Lee. Like I mentioned before, Captain Marvel and Frozen 2 were co-directed. They weren't solely by one person. So Greta Gerwig is your sole owner of that title, and probably going to be forever, if I'm being completely honest here. Elsewhere, Meg to the Trench earned $43.7 million from 75 overseas territories, taking the sequel's international total to $202.8 million. Warner Brothers produced the film about a prehistoric shark who meets its match in Jason Statham. When will these primordial creatures learn that you can't lay a dorsal fin on the transportal? Christopher Nolan's Oppenheimer continues to impress at the global box office, adding $32 million to its haul to bring its international total to $385 million. The R-rated drama about J. Robert Oppenheimer, one of the driving forces behind the creation of the atomic bomb, has earned an impressive $649 million worldwide. It ranks as the highest-grossing World War II film in history, surpassing Saving Private Ryan and Nolan's earlier look at the conflict Dunkirk. Columbia Pictures' Gran Turismo, based on a true story, began its international rollout with $10.7 million from 30 major markets. It did particularly well in France, where it earned $2.3 million, followed by the UK with $1.3 million, and Australia and Germany with $1 million apiece. The adaptation of the PlayStation video game opens in the US on August 25th. We also have Blue Beetle opening up as well for its box office opening weekend debut. All right, so Meg 2 is still doing well, Oppenheimer still doing well, and Barbie is still basically breaking all the records. All right, so this is what I really wanted to get to. So I talked about this on my Twitter page. Actually, if you haven't followed me there, go follow me there, actually. And it's something where you have movies nowadays where these big budgets, and with these big budgets come a lot of marketing, which also bloats the budget. So studios realize to themselves that at a certain period point in time at the box office, that if you had a movie come out, it did very well. And then if it did very well, you put more money into the budget. That way you could even reap the bigger rewards of the sequel, right? So an example of this would be like, let's say you make a movie, smaller budget. Then if it does well, gets you a lot of money. The next movie, you put a little bit more into it because it would justify putting more into it from the previous movie, right? Then that's been a constant trend in Hollywood, is that one movie does well for its budget and size, then the next movie, studios, which is not the wrong idea, put more into the sequel's budget. Then after that, the sequel would do very well, and then it would keep happening. But now, since the landscape has changed, you have to look at it from these big budgets have been too out of hand, they're way too bloated, and it's one of these things where if the bigger budgets you have can't get recuperated back in your box office, that's pretty bad. Now, there's a lot of nuance to this that a lot of people just don't bring up, which obviously I can't bring up every single angle of every conversation, right? But I will bring up a main thing, which is movies cannot perform with these big budgets now, given the fact that the window to perform for these movies is substantially low compared to what they used to be. So back years ago, and also Tom Cruise had this last year, and they did this with other movies as well. They do this rarely now with new movies, but you guys have seen it. So movies back then used to have a 3 to 4 month window to perform, right? So that means that if a movie flopped, it would actually be very, very bad because there was such a large window to perform. Now, given the fact that movie studios have streaming services now, they've shrunken the theatrical window so that these movies with these bigger budgets can't really perform as well, So they have such a small window to perform in this time, and then if the movies don't do as well in not only opening weekend or the second weekend or even weeks 3 and 4, at that point, you're already past in that monthly territory. They'll just throw it on a streaming service. I mean, that's happened recently with the new Transformer movie and the Flash movie, right? So you're looking at the big blockbuster tentpoles not having enough time to perform. Then you're also looking at the studio has actively shrunk the window, so they have this weird short period to perform, and if they don't perform, they're throwing them on a streaming service. But then that is also devaluing the theater experience too. So if you're devaluing the theater experience, you're basically saying, okay, audience, if this movie doesn't perform, you can just watch it on a streaming service, which is also another problem in devaluing that as well. So it's a mixture of a lot of things here. And I think Mission Impossible 7, I've seen all the Mission Impossible movies except the newest one. Hopefully I'll get to the theaters to watch it. Tom Cruise movies are always a blast to watch in theaters. This just came out at the wrong time, which is crazy because this movie came out a week before the big giant Barbenheimer trend. Whereas now, I think if you release this movie in August, if Tom Cruise had waited to release this movie in August, I think it would have did very well. Given the fact that these big blockbusters technically eat from each other, Barbie and Oppenheimer definitely ate from Mission Impossible 7's box office, because no one says this is a bad movie, you know? But Indiana Jones 5 is another story where Indiana Jones 5 is a movie you don't really think anybody asked for this, you know, and it's Disney's problem of just like really just giving out random, you know, sequels and unnecessary remakes that no one asked for. You know, Indiana Jones, I think a Variety reported that Indiana Jones 5 could be losing upwards of like $100 million. No, it's going to lose more than that. That's not true. Indiana Jones 5 is going to be a massive box office flop. That let's not, you know, undersell this, right? Mission Impossible 7 will stay in theaters a lot longer. So if Mission Impossible 7 loses money, it won't be as bad, but it will still be a pretty bad thing. And I think at around Mission Impossible 8 coming out very, very soon, within like 2025, you have to imagine, given the writer's strike, since they can't really film right now, they'll have to reassess the strategy of releasing the 8th and presumably final installment of the movie, of that movie franchise, actually. Big budgets, big headaches, why Indiana Jones 5 and Mission Impossible 7 are struggling to make a profit. Indiana Jones 5 is not making any profit at all. That is going to be a flop, okay? Not even time-tested adventurers like Indiana Jones 5 and Ethan Hunt are immune to the shifting sands of the movie business. Those action heroes, played by Harrison Ford and Tom Cruise, return to theaters in Disney's Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny and Paramount's Mission Impossible Dead Reckoning Part 1, with the hope that the potent combination of escapism and nostalgia would invigorate the box office. Instead, both films are among the summer's most baffling disappointments, and much of that has to do with their oversized budgets. Indiana Jones 5, which opened in late June, has grossed $375 million globally after 6 weeks of release, while Mission Impossible 7, which debuted in July, has generated $523 million after 5 weeks of release. Those ticket sales are respectable in the current movie-going landscape, especially because the films are part of decade-old properties aimed at older audiences. Okay, so that is pretty much in the territory of a month and about, this is about given, with these movies, yeah, it's about a month and some change that they've kept these movies out. But remember, these movies weren't going to be going to streaming anytime soon. So when I'm mentioning that in my previous point to you guys is, some movies, obviously, are going to have a longer-ish window. You see my point there? Given their big budgets that they justify to take in some level of money, okay? The trouble is that each sequel cost roughly $300 million before marketing spends of at least $100 million, making them among the most expensive movies of all time. Yes, so when you're factoring in, so when you had billion-dollar movies like Infinity War, Endgame, Star Wars The Force Awakens, The Rise of Skywalker, movies with $300 million budgets need to be taking in almost $1 billion to be profitable, or at least $950 million. So around the Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness box office total gross is what they at least need to be getting in to not only be profitable, but at least not be breaking even. Because with these movies, you do not need to be breaking even. Breaking even essentially means you lost, okay? It means nobody wins, okay? The other thing is when you're sinking in this much money in marketing and this much money to the budget, you gotta be getting a big number here. It's just how it is, you know, regardless of the film's quality, because that's gonna be a subjective thing to person, they gotta perform. It's just what it is, you know? After falling short of expectations, they could lose nearly $100 million in their theatrical runs. Could. And I doubt that. These movies are going to be losing a lot of money in their theatrical runs. Mission Impossible 7 was the one where they pushed it back and obviously, you know, had the massive reshoots and stuff like that. So that the company that finances Mission Impossible 7 is Skydance, right? That's going to not be doing very well at all. That's bad. I mean, I imagine the movie's good. I love me some Tom Cruise. I love me some Mission Impossible, but that's not good on a performance level right there. According to sources familiar with the financials of similar productions. Yeah, so it's the same thing of like if a movie had a $200 million budget like The Flash, right? And it takes in like $400 million. That's bad. That's a flop. That's bad. And The Flash didn't even take that and it took in like 2 something anyway, right? So keep that in mind. Movies around the $200 to $300 million budgets need to be making in $750 to $1 billion. That's just the territory they're in. And you're factoring in marketing as well. So movies usually have to take, 3 times their budgets back in? So just multiply a film's budget times 3. That's what I usually always say for like the layman's terms, right? These movies would have been a lot more economical if it weren't for COVID. Interesting. But even if that meant their budgets weren't inflated, at the end of the day, these movies cost what they cost and performed how they performed. Studio executives privately gripe that assessing a movie's profitability purely on its theatrical results fails to account for what the film earns on demand and through cable and streaming licensing deals. Yes, but that is a separate revenue stream. I personally don't count that because that's just a separate revenue stream. If you're talking about just purely the box office, you're talking about purely just the box office. That's it. I get it. You can't make money through that. I know that, but that's not this, you know? So that's kind of a cop-out in my opinion. Studios don't provide complete information about how much money movies generate beyond their box office results. Still, there's reason to believe that these revenue streams will ultimately make Dead Reckoning Part 1 and Dial of Destiny more valuable than their ticket sales suggest. Disney chief Bob Iger, for instance, recently told analysts that although the company was working to reduce the cost of the movies it produces, making Dial of Destiny contributed to a surge of interest in previous Indiana Jones films on Disney+. So they're probably looking at people revisiting Indiana Jones movies, and they're like, oh yeah, we'll just make an Indiana Jones 5. But these people don't really live in the real world, so we'll see how that really goes, right? There's an opportunity to make money back with streaming and other sales, but that's long into the future. That doesn't really matter though, you know? You'll have lost so much money up front that that won't matter, honestly. Like for these movies to be profitable in that type of revenue, that type of stream of revenue, that takes years for that. That we're talking like 2040 if that was going to be the case. Like, come on. The industry loves to cap. As for Dead Reckoning Part 1, sources familiar with the movie's financial modeling say that it will break even if it can hit $600 million. Pfft, that's a lie. That's a freaking lie. Come on. That's a lie. That's such bullcrap. So, here's mine. Mission Impossible 7 is $300 million, not counting the marketing, okay? Which would put it at $400 million. And it would break even at $600 million? Come on. I don't believe that. Sorry, I don't care. That's cap. That's pure cap right there. Ugh, good lord. That would be over the film's entire run, factoring in home entertainment and licensing revenue, and would include Cruise's share of the gross. He remains one of the few movie stars who still get contractual bonuses before a film is out of the red. But movies like Mission Impossible and Indiana Jones are designed to generate windfalls on the order of $100 million. After all, the prior Indiana Jones adventure, 2008's Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, pulled in $790 million globally and remains the franchise's highest grossing film, not adjusted for inflation. The previous Mission Impossible's entry, 2018's Fallout, earned a series best $791 million, while Top Gun Maverick, which introduced a new generation to Cruise's penchant for captivating death-defying stunts, toppled the billion-dollar mark in 2022. It's crazy how both these franchises' previous installments outgrossed their newest ones. That's crazy. The stark reality is that blockbusters face a treacherous path to profitability. Take Universal's high-octane Fast X, whose production budget was $340 million, despite earning $740 million at the global box office this summer. That film barely crawled into the black and will post a modest profit, according to sources familiar with its financing. No, that's cap too. That is such bullshit right there. And I love Variety. I think Variety do some great things, but that is such freaking bullcrap. No way this movie's profit. These don't believe it. I don't believe it. Nope. I guarantee you for Fast. So they're gonna be doing the Dwayne Johnson solo movie next, apparently. So he's coming back to the franchise. I'll have a video covering that very, very soon. So, and you also have the final movie, which is gonna be Fast X Part 2 coming out very soon. I mean, Vin Diesel said there might be a part 3 because the studio liked what they saw in Fast X, but we'll have to see. We'll cross that bridge when we get to it, right? So Fast X, one of the most expensive movies ever made, took in a profit with that. And that's a good number. Don't get it twisted. Some of these numbers are good, but that's not going to be good enough. No way. These people are underselling that. Come on, man. All of this comes with an important asterisk. Production budgets for pandemic-era tentpoles ballooned due to release date delays and COVID-related safety measures. All the while, the global box office is contracting as two major markets, China and Russia, remain uncertain at best and impenetrable at worst. On Fallout, for instance, China contributed $181 million to the gross, compared with $48.2 million for Dead Reckoning Part 1. Thanks to a diminished international marketplace, movies of all shapes and sizes are struggling to reach pre-pandemic grosses. Only 4 movies so far in 2023, 8 in 2022, 5 in 2021, and 0 in 2020 have surpassed $700 million. That's compared with 12 movies in 2019 and 9 in 2018. Yes, that's another very important thing too, which is the international box office thing is not like understated by some of these guys, but some movies can't get into those other larger territories like China and Russia due to more political things, you know, or political aspects that I can't really cover in these videos. But you guys know what I'm talking about, right? Woke stuff. Cough, cough. Sadly, films may not be getting much cheaper to make, even though coronavirus-era restrictions have loosened. Hollywood's dual labor strike, which has resulted in a work stoppage, means that several major titles set for 2024 and beyond could miss their release dates. Some studio executives estimate that the movies that were in production when actors hit the picketing lines in July have seen their production costs rise as much as $2 million a month. But the box office has seen its share of winners too, and several of them don't hail from pre-existing piece of intellectual property. Christopher Nolan's Oppenheimer is going to be extremely profitable as ticket sales have crossed $605 million and counting on its $100 million budget. Then there's Greta Gerwig's Barbie, made for a comparatively affordable $145 million, which has provided something fresh with its feminist-fueled look at the popular toy. It stands at $1.180 billion at the globally, and will soon overtake the Super Mario Bros. Movie as the highest grossing release of 2023. Barbie was made for under $150 million. That's the price point you want to see when you hit $1 billion at the box office. Warner Brothers, which released the film, isn't the only one profiting from its success. Margot Robbie, who brought Barbie to life on screen and produced the movie, stands to make at least $50 million in salary and bonuses, according to 3 insiders. That's enough to buy one hell of a Malibu dream house. So, yes, so we have to factor in shorter windows to perform, the international box office is not accessible for like some movies as well, and or when they get finally released there's other stuff already coming out, so the movies just eat themselves as well. And let's see and go over the whole Fast X thing. So as you guys know, I'm a huge fan of this franchise. I love the Fast and Furious movies. Fight me. I think they're fun, entertaining. I love this franchise, and it's gonna suck when these movies are gone, right? But Fast and Furious is a franchise where, you know, after Furious 7, which obviously is a nice send-off for Paul Walker's character, in the movie itself, because I'll be releasing those movie reviews very soon for you guys, because I found a way to get them back. It's a movie where, okay, I'll just say it this way. The story of that movie is not very good, you know, and it's one of those things where Paul Walker's send-off is one of the best contributing factors to it. And then when you factor in all the other drama this franchise has gone through, I think more of these movies is starting to not be a good thing. But you have to kind of look at their end box office results. So from Hobbs and Shaw, Fast 9, and this one, they've all accumulated the $700 million mark. I think these movies aren't going to be taking in past that. So the previous Fast and Furious movie to take in that number was Fast and Furious 6. Fast and Furious 7 and Fast and Furious 8 had $1 billion attached to them, so that would mean that Universal would go, hey, let's put more money into these. Then you had the Dwayne Johnson and Jason Statham movie. So why has the last 3 Fast movies grossed $700 million, though? And this is also coming out on streaming very, very soon. You have the big Fast X collection coming out as well. You know, I watched Fast X in theaters. Had a great time watching this in theaters. It's like the Avengers of Fast and Furious, right? That's Infinity War for Fast and Furious. But it seems to be that the interest in these Fast movies is, I'm not saying it's waning, it's just flatlining. These movies are basically kind of flatlining at $700 million. That's not bad, but given their budgets, you need a little bit more than that. You know, this movie with its budget and marketing needs $1 billion, or at least $900 million. Let's just say that, right? But that's not happening, you know? So why have these movies been quote unquote flatlining? I mean, I'll just say this. There's many things, right? There's many things I could bring up for these movies. But as a fan of these movies, I can tell you this. The movies have just gotten just worse, honestly. They're just not good. And it's not that they're not good, because that's going to be a subjective thing, person to person, obviously. But it's the way that they're constructed. It's just it's that these movies are just kind of like dumb fun, but the movies themselves are dumb without the dumb fun part. You see my point there? Like Fast 9 is just an awful movie for the most part. Fast 8 is just also not good itself. But then you factor in Fast X is a movie where, like, it's not as bad as the other two. It's like dumb fun itself, but the movies themselves don't really understand what they're really doing anymore in terms of like the overall story they're trying to tell, to the point where it's just getting kind of messy. This weird reliance on trying to keep Paul Walker's character around while the actor is dead is, I get it, they want to honor him, but it's also odd. You know, it's one of these things where maybe the franchise should have just ended after potentially Fast 8 when you're thinking about how that movie ended, you know? But they kept it going because Cypher ended up living, actually. So let's go over this. And this is from Screen Rant, so let's see how this plays out for them, right? Fast X's profits on $704 million box office reported. Bad news for Vin Diesel's franchise. It's crazy because Dwayne Johnson just came back to this franchise too, after failing to do Black Adam. Fast X may have made $704 million at the global box office, but its profits will be minimal as it struggles against high production costs. So here are your 3 bullet points. Fast X's sizable box office gross of $704 million places it as the 4th highest grossing movie of 2023, but its large budget of $340 million prevents it from making a significant profit. Compared to other franchise films released in 2023, Fast X's box office fate is relatively better, as titles like Mission Impossible 7 and Indiana Jones 5 are expected to lose money. Fast X's performance raises questions about the viability of traditional summer blockbusters, as lower budget films like Barbie have achieved greater success at the box office, suggesting that studios should consider reducing budgets for big franchises. Fast X will turn a minimal profit despite a respectable box office gross after releasing on May 19th. Fast X sped its way to $704 million at the global box office after opening to $320 million. While this figure does not put Fast X at the top of the franchise, the series' top runner being 2015's Furious 7, and we know why Furious 7 is their top grossing movie due to Paul Walker's death. The global gross situates Fast X as the fourth highest grossing movie of 2023 thus far. Despite its success, Fast X will see a small profit margin according to a recent report from Variety. It said Fast X's large budget, which is a whopping $340 million, is to blame for its lackluster earnings. The movie will make a modest profit, but it won't be anything close to the highest grosses Universal likely hoped for. Fast X's profit margin may be disappointing for the franchise and its studio, but it is unfortunately unsurprising when looking at other major 2023 films. This year has been a trying one for the major franchise films, seeing the releases of high-budgeted titles such as Mission Impossible: The Reckoning Part 1, Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny, and The Flash alongside Fast X. The Mission Impossible and Indiana Jones sequels have fared poorly at the box office and, as of now, are both expected to lose money. Thus, Fast X is actually in a better position than a good number of franchise titles this year. On the global box office chart, Fast X trails behind only 3 movies: the Super Mario Bros. Movie, Barbie, which is showing no signs of slowing down, and the MCU's Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3. While it will turn a profit and is among the top titles of the year, though Fast X has indicated some wider problems with the Fast and Furious franchise, which is expected to release at least 2 more movies in the coming years. Alright, Fast X's performance begs the question of how modern audiences respond to the traditional summer blockbuster. Barbie, whose feminist themes and creative team make it an unconventional box office success, had a comparatively smaller budget at an estimated $145 million. It has already made over $1 billion at the worldwide box office. Fast X's fate may just be a sign for studios to cut back on back-breaking budgets for its bigger franchises. That is true. Yeah, I think they need to reduce these budgets. Movies losing that amount of money consistently is not good. Other movies have had this happen to them as well. I think Fast and Furious's issues are more bigger than its budget in general. I think there's much more with this franchise as to the reason why people have not went and came out and seen these movies as much as like Fast and Furious 7 and Fast and Furious 8, obviously. Like their last 3 movies have hit a $700 million mark, right? So I think that's where these movies are going to end up basically plateauing and flatlining at. You know, if you're just looking at the recent movies performances, I mean, Dwayne Johnson came back to this franchise, and I mean, the numbers are still pretty big there, so we'll have to see how his Luke Hobbs solo film is going to do, obviously, because that's apparently supposed to be the next one. And then after that, we have, you know, Fast X Part 2, which is, I imagine, Avengers Infinity War with cars, right? So, yeah, like I mentioned before, this is going to be a more longer of a past weekend at the box office recap video. There's other movies that I had to talk about with you guys. So what do you guys think is the biggest issue when it comes to these bigger franchises now when they release their newest installment and they're not doing as well as previous installments as, you know, other years have passed at the box office? So see you guys later. Like, comment, and subscribe. Most of all, enjoy. I am MSK, and this is Variety Content Entertainment, your one place for a variety of content. All right, see you guys later. Deuces. Peace.